News legal analyst, and Carissa Kranz, attorney. Also in Washington, Paula Reed, our CBS News justice reporter, and in Los Angeles, Robert Bamille, former U.S. Senior Deputy District Attorney, now practicing attorney in Southern California. Thank you all. A lot of ground to cover here. And Ricky, let me begin with you. I want to get everyone's take on what stood out most. And this was an hour-long proceeding for people who may have just been tuning in. This was an opportunity for both sides, the government of the United States as well as Washington State, to present their arguments once more in oral fashion to these judges. What, Ricky, do you think was most significant? I know towards the end there you were jotting furiously as one of the judges was questioning the government's attorney.
One of the things that I think stands out is that what you have here is what we would call a hot bench. This is a bench of 3 judges who have really done their homework, who are interested in this case, who know the background of immigration laws, who know the background of cases. And one of the things the public does not understand, who is listening to this and probably reacting on the Twitter sphere, is that this is what judges are supposed to do. They're supposed to ask tough questions, and they want to get to a solution. What stood out for me is really what kept happening in the second half of the argument and ultimately in rebuttal, is that these judges appear to be looking for a way to both either limit the order. They might like it redrafted, but that's not going to be their problem. That's the executive's problem. But also, they're in a question of redundancy. Do we want to go back and go through this all over again for a preliminary injunction, or should we put the whole thing together now? And you have arguments from both sides trying to figure out which way the judges really want to go here. Do we go back to court? It's still fast-tracked in the district court, or do we try to dispose of it now?
What about you, Carissa? What stood out? And also, did you get a sense that there was more skepticism coming from the judges towards Washington State, that attorney, the Solicitor General, or towards the Department of Justice attorney? Could you suss that out at all? Because it seemed there was vigorous questioning of both sides.
It's very normal for oral argument at a court. Like, what the viewers might see is what's going on. There's a whole bunch of legalese going back and forth. The lawyers are talking a bunch of legal mumbo-jumbo, and then the judges are jumping in with these complicated questions that might throw the lawyers into a tailspin on how they may or may not want to answer it. That is one of the things about oral argument that is unpredictable. You never know what's going to happen. You can go there with a speech written on what you want to say, and judges are going to jump in because they're going to want to be able to analyze something and write an opinion that's well thought out. The Ninth Circuit is a traditionally liberal circuit. I would not be surprised at all if they uphold the stay on the travel ban and allow the district court and defer to the district court to continue their briefing on the preliminary injunction, which is supposed to be finished, I believe, next week or February 17th. And then today was more, even though we got into the merits at oral argument, it was not really supposed to be about the merits. Mm-hmm. Today is whether or not, the executive order is going to stand while the merits are well thought out in the legal process, which could take time and travel all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. A lot of things can still happen.
Yeah. So, Paula, let me turn to you then. What stood out to you? I know you have been explaining this to us here for days leading up to this. For folks watching at home, the bottom line is, for now, no decision, right?
That's right. We don't expect a decision tonight. We also would expect something by the end of the week, hopefully. But what really stood out to me is how the Department of Justice in the first half of that, their representative, he struggled a bit. And it's important to put that in the full context of what is going on at the Department of Justice right now. They do not have a confirmed attorney general. They have an acting attorney general. They're missing a lot of important staff people there. The Department of Justice was not consulted, nor did they have input on how this order was actually drafted. And then just a few days ago, we confirmed that the acting solicitor general and the acting assistant attorney general, who had been so instrumental in arguing this case, they had to back off of their case because of a conflict of interest with their prior law firm, Jones Day. So that's why the lawyer who was sent to argue this on behalf of the Department of Justice, he was at a bit of a disadvantage, but I do think he was able to get his point across. The key to their argument is that this executive order was within the president's power, that it's a temporary pause, and that the court upset this balance that the president was trying to strike between greeting people warmly into this country, but also protecting our national security. And finally, and most importantly, they argue that this temporary restraining order is overly broad and therefore should be lifted.
Ron, let me turn to you. You have argued before the Ninth Circuit. Tell me what stood out to you. And also, do you agree with Paula's assessment that at times it seemed as though the Justice Department's attorney may have struggled a bit?
I think he was a train wreck, actually. I felt sorry for the guy.
Wreck, okay.
Train wreck, yes, as in disaster. When you have 30 minutes to argue and you spend 15 minutes stuttering, that's not a good day at the courthouse. I could tell initially that, and also the other thing that we don't know of, and because we don't have eyes in the room, at least I didn't, is the atmosphere in the room. And I think when he stood up, he had a good idea it wasn't going with him. Judge Friedland is completely anti the government. You could see that in her questioning and the way she questioned both sides. I thought it was clear that she has pretty much decided the case for herself. So I would disagree with anybody who would say differently. Now, the voices I had trouble distinguishing was Canby and Clifton. One of them appears to be siding with the government. The other one seems to be siding with the state of Washington. I believe that the decision will come down about Thursday. It's going to be against the executive order. They're either going to send it back to the district court for further hearings, but I don't believe there's going to be overturning of the stay at this point, overturning of the temporary restraining order at this point.
And so, Carissa, let me turn to you. What happens now, you think, as based on some of the questions that we heard from these judges and the vigorous line of questioning that they were pursuing in some instances, not just questioning the U.S. government, but also the attorney for Washington State as well on these complex legal points, but essentially what I took away from it was a lack of clarity in the executive order seems to have left these judges wondering about the best way now to approach clarity. And should that be something the judges should do, or is that something that is on the executive branch? Can you help us understand that?
Sure. The basis that the executive orders such as this one should be interpreted would be a rational basis review, right? So you can't have a ban against the Muslims. You can't have a ban against a country's origin or a religion. But you can have a ban if national security is at risk. So they're going to be determining whether or not the merits are weighed in favor of immigration interests or national security interests. Going forward, we don't really know how they're going to come down. They probably are going to send it back to the district court. There's deference to the district court, allow them to consider the preliminary injunction briefing. And then it would be rational. I mean, you have a rational basis review. It would be rational for the president and Congress and the powers that are vested within the president for national security and foreign policy. It would make sense for them to redraft the order so there wouldn't be all these concerns. However, it doesn't seem like they want to do that. It seems like they want to go forward and, execute their right to have these executive orders and let the courts, argue and take it all the way through the process. It seems that Trump's administration believes that they have a strong argument that they can win this. And, but it does seem that the executive order probably should be redrafted because there are exceptions that now they're verbally carving out, but it's not written. Mm-hmm. And now we're supposed to just trust.
In the green card, the case of people who are green card holders, et cetera. Right.
So we're supposed to trust on goodwill now that the exceptions are going to be carved out based on verbal exceptions. And how is that going to be enforced? Mm-hmm. It would make sense that they would redraft this during the stay and then have an executive order that made more sense, that wouldn't unleash the chaos that that sent the media into a frenzy.
Yeah. Paula, what about you? What do you think about that? It was interesting at one point, I think it was Judge Canby asked the Justice Department attorney, what if President Trump said simply, we're not going to let any Muslims in? Could he do that? So is there going to be, you think, and I'm asking you to kind of speculate a little bit, but based on the performance of the attorney representing the Justice Department, based on the lack of clarity that we know has existed with this executive order in the rollout of it, you think there will be, in fact, an effort now to present an updated or a modified executive order to try and answer some of these questions that have been raised during these oral arguments?
Well, it's one thing I've learned in the past few weeks. It's just never try to guess what the Trump administration is going to do. Now, I agree that one of the most easy solutions here is to go back to the table, get more input from the Department of Homeland Security, get more input from your Attorney General once he's confirmed, make some carve-outs, draft this in a way that anticipates Supreme Court review, because the way it is drafted right now, in addition to the rollout and not really consulting Congress, is so problematic. And part of the reason that even just at this initial stage, they're already so embroiled in litigation. So absolutely, I think redrafting this would be a very smart way to avoid just becoming embroiled in litigation. But so far, it seems that they're willing to litigate this, every little piece of it, every step of the way. So it doesn't seem that's the path they're going to take. But we'll see what happens when presumed Attorney General Jeff Sessions is confirmed. He may step in and perhaps take over a little bit more, because as this was drafted, we know that the head of the Department of Homeland Security was not actually consulted. He got to see some drafts, but he did not get to have input, nor did an Attorney General, because the acting Attorney General at the time said she wouldn't enforce it. She said it was bad policy, and as we all know, she was fired for that.
All right, Ron, I'll let you have the last word. We only have about a minute or so left, but you think next steps in this process, what do you think we can expect now?
Well, the problem the president has is, I wouldn't roll back anything, by the way. I wouldn't change the executive order at all. I'd go forward this way. That's what they've said they were going to do. So I would go forward with it, because they're going to lose, unless, of course, that he gets his justice on the Supreme Court and he switches the forum to his favor. At this point, the forums are against him. They're not for him. So he's going to have a great difficulty in getting this upheld. However, even if it's rejected, even if it dies there, there's nothing preventing him from drafting the next executive order to implement slightly different and imply that, and try to get that before a forum that would be more favorable to him.
All right. My thanks to my panel, Ricky Kleeman, Carissa Kranz, Paula Reed, and Ron Bamille. Thank you all so much for your insight. Appreciate it. President Trump is vowing to take his immigration ban all the way to the